The courtroom was a furnace, the air crackling with raw tension. Westminster Magistrates' Court, May 2, 2025, had seen its share of drama, but nothing like this. Russell Brand, comedian, actor, provocateur, and self-proclaimed spiritual warrior, stood in the dock, his black suit sharp but his face taut, a man caught in a storm of his own making. Outside, paparazzi swarmed through London's drizzle, their cameras flashing like a firing squad. Inside, reporters scribbled furiously, spectators whispered, and Brand's eyes darted, flickering with defiance and dread. The charges were dynamite: 1 count of rape, 1 count of oral rape, 1 count of indecent assault, and 2 counts of sexual assault, spanning 1999 to 2005, involving 4 women. He pleaded not guilty, his voice steady but laced with an edge of fury. Conditional bail was granted, stay in the UK, no contact with the complainants, and the next hearing was set for May 30 at a higher court. This wasn't just a trial. This was the implosion of a cultural giant, a man who'd flirted with scandal for decades, now fighting to salvage his name, his freedom, and his legacy. Russell Brand's story began in the rough edges of Grays, Essex, 1975. A working-class kid with a fractured childhood, parents divorced, mother battling cancer, he was a bundle of restless energy, sharp wit, and early demons. By his teens, he was dabbling in drugs, dreaming of escape, and honing a charisma that could light up a room or burn it down. His break came in the late 1990s, hosting MTV's Dance Factory and Select, where his quick tongue and roguish charm made him a star. By the early 2000s, he was a comedy juggernaut, packing venues with stand-up that was equal parts filthy and philosophical, a rockstar philosopher hybrid who could riff on Nietzsche 1 minute and crude sex the next. He landed gigs at BBC Radio, Channel 4, and XFM, his persona a chaotic blend of swagger and intellect. He was magnetic, divisive, and unstoppable. Hollywood came calling, and Brand delivered. His role as Aldous Snow in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, 2008, and Get Him to the Greek, 2010, was a masterstroke, the hedonistic rockstar a mirror of his own public image. Off-screen, he was a tabloid magnate, married to Katy Perry from 2010 to 2012, wrestling heroin addiction, and spilling his sex-soaked life in memoirs like My Bookie Wook and Bookie Wook 2. Controversy wasn't just his shadow, it was his fuel. He dressed as Osama bin Laden at MTV the day after September 11, got sacked for it, and laughed. He read porn aloud on XFM, lost that job too, and shrugged. He prank-called police live on BBC Radio, sparked a media firestorm, and walked away grinning. Brand didn't just push boundaries, he obliterated them, thriving on the chaos. By the 2010s, he reinvented himself. The crude comic morphed into a wellness guru, swapping dick jokes for YouTube rants on spirituality, anti-establishment conspiracies, and the evils of woke culture. His podcast and Rumble videos amassed millions of followers, drawn to his tale of being silenced by the mainstream. He converted to Christianity, got baptized, and dove headfirst into right-wing circles, cozying up to Tucker Carlson and appearing at the 2024 Republican National Convention. To his fans, he was a prophet, a truth-teller exposing the lies of the elite. To critics, he was a grifter, wrapping opportunism in spiritual jargon. Love him or hate him, Brand was a force, his every move sparking debate, devotion, or disgust. The hurricane hit in September 2023. A joint investigation by The Times, The Sunday Times, and Channel 4's dispatches dropped a bombshell. 4 women accused Brand of sexual misconduct between 2006 and 2013, at the peak of his fame. The allegations were searing: rape, sexual assault, emotional abuse. One woman claimed Brand raped her in his Los Angeles home in 2012, saying she sought treatment at a rape crisis center the same day. Another, 16 when Brand was 31, alleged a 3-month relationship marked by emotional manipulation, with Brand calling her the child and controlling her every move. A third said he assaulted her while they worked together in LA, threatening legal action if she spoke out. The fourth accused him of sexual assault and coercive behavior during their relationship, describing a pattern of dominance and fear. The Dispatch's documentary, Russell Brand, In Plain Sight, was a gut punch. It painted Brand as a predator cloaked in celebrity, enabled by a media machine that laughed off his excesses as just Russell being Russell. The fallout was brutal. YouTube demonetized his channel, gutting his income. The BBC and Channel 4 erased his content from their platforms, as if he'd never existed. His management, Tavistock Wood, dropped him, claiming they'd been horribly misled by his denials. His bipolarization tour stalled, with 3 stand-up shows postponed indefinitely. The Metropolitan Police launched an investigation, and by November 2024, detectives passed a file to the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS, signaling serious intent. Brand didn't go quietly. A day before the documentary aired, he posted a preemptive video on Instagram, calling the allegations a coordinated media attack to discredit his anti-establishment views. "I was very, very promiscuous," he admitted, "but all my relationships were absolutely consensual." He cast himself as a victim, targeted for daring to challenge the elites on vaccines, globalism, and corporate power. His supporters erupted, flooding X with hashtags like #StandWithRussell and #WitchHunt. "Why now?" they demanded, pointing to his shift from comedian to political firebrand. On X, users like @0president and @globaldis framed the accusations as retaliation for his vaccine skepticism, while others dug into his memoirs, where he'd bragged about his sexual exploits. Didn't that prove he'd been upfront about his past? On April 4, 2025, the CPS authorized charges, and the Met Police formally accused Brand of crimes from 1999 to 2005, predating the Dispatch's allegations. The details were chilling: a rape in Bournemouth in 1999, when Brand was a rising MTV star, an indecent assault in Westminster in 2001, during his BBC radio days, an oral rape and sexual assault in Westminster in 2004, as he dominated comedy, and another sexual assault in Westminster between 2004 and 2005, when he was untouchable. These involved 4 women, their accounts painting a picture of a man who wielded his charisma like a weapon. The CPS's Jaswant Narwal was unequivocal: "We carefully reviewed the evidence. These are serious allegations of non-recent offenses involving 4 women." Brand was charged via postal requisition, a court summons rather than an arrest, reflecting his cooperation with police interviews since 2023. In a video on X, he leaned hard into his redemption narrative. "I was a fool, a drug addict, a sex addict, an imbecile," he said, gesturing to his pre-Christian days. "But what I never was a rapist. I've never engaged in non-consensual activity." He thanked his fans, framing the charges as a chance to clear his name in court. The reaction was polarized. On X, supporters like @2president and @globaldis doubled down, alleging the charges were a setup tied to his political stances. Others, like @Midas_Lorene and @Uncensored News, focused on the victims, noting the courage it took to come forward after decades. The media frenzy was relentless. The Guardian dissected his BBC tenure, The New York Times chronicled his Hollywood collapse, and Cosmopolitan published a timeline questioning how much his employers, BBC, Channel 4, MTV, knew and ignored. The May 2 hearing was pandemonium. Brand arrived at Westminster Magistrates' Court under siege, paparazzi alleging he'd touched one woman's breasts and dragged another toward a male lavatory, claims not yet in the formal charges but fueling the chaos. A crowd split between "Justice for Russell" and "Believe Women" signs roared as he entered, flanked by police. The 14-minute hearing was procedural but electric. Brand confirmed his name and Oxfordshire address, though rumors swirled he'd moved to the US. The charges were read: 2 counts of rape, 1 count of oral rape, 1 count of indecent assault, 2 counts of sexual assault. He pleaded not guilty, his voice firm, his posture rigid. The magistrate granted conditional bail, no contact with the complainants, no leaving the UK. The case was escalated to a higher court, likely Southwark Crown Court, for May 30. Brand's legal team, led by a battle-hardened barrister, hinted at a defense built on consent, credibility, and context. They'd likely argue the allegations were exaggerated or fabricated, possibly tied to Brand's high-profile feuds with the media or his political enemies. The prosecution, backed by the CPS, leaned on the consistency of the 4 women's accounts, despite the years that had passed. Detective Superintendent Andy Furphy, leading the Met's investigation, made a public plea for more victims to come forward, suggesting the case could grow. Outside court, Brand faced the cameras. "I'm grateful for the chance to defend myself," he said, his tone measured but his eyes restless, darting to the crowd. He climbed into a black SUV, and the mob exploded. "Support, jeers, chaos. X captured the frenzy at RT_com amplified the paparazzi claims, at Haktkamp, a Turkish outlet, called it a global scandal, and at Uncensored News noted Brand's calm acceptance of bail terms. Brand's troubles weren't confined to the UK. In 2023, a woman, Jane Doe, filed a civil lawsuit in New York under the Adult Survivors Act, accusing Brand of sexually assaulting her on the set of Arthur in 2010. She alleged he exposed himself, reeking of alcohol, and later assaulted her in a bathroom while a crew member stood guard. Warner Brothers, named in the suit for negligence, denied the claims. Brand's lawyer, Mark Caccaro, called the lawsuit baseless, noting Brand had been sober for years by 2010. The case was ongoing, but Brand's team feared it could trigger U.S. criminal charges, especially after the UK indictment. Court documents revealed their attempt to delay the New York case, citing overlap with the London investigation, but a judge granted only a deposition extension to October 30, 2025. The U.S. allegations fueled speculation. People reported Brand's belief that American prosecutors might target him, given his right-wing affiliations. His appearance at the 2024 RNC and his interviews with Tucker Carlson made him a lightning rod for progressive critics, who saw his legal woes as karmic justice. Yet his base saw a conspiracy, pointing to the timing. Why did these decades-old claims surface only after Brand's pivot to anti-establishment crusader? On X, @2 President and others claimed the charges were retaliation for his vaccine skepticism, a view echoed by fringe commentators. The noise was deafening, but the CPS stayed focused, with Narwhal stressing the need for a fair trial and warning against prejudicial reporting. Brand's case was a cultural flashpoint, a #MeToo reckoning reborn. How had his behavior, openly brash, often predatory, been normalized for so long? The Guardian reported internal reviews at the BBC and Channel 4, with the BBC issuing a January 2025 apology to staff who felt unable to report Brand's conduct during his 2006 to 2008 radio stint. Banijay UK, a Channel 4 production company, launched an inquiry into his time there, uncovering a culture where celebrity shielded misconduct. The findings were damning. Producers ignored complaints, executives looked the other way, and Brand's charm disarmed accountability. His defenders argued he was a scapegoat, a victim of post-MeToo overreach. They pointed to his memoirs, where he'd flaunted his promiscuous past. Didn't that prove he'd never hidden his lifestyle? On X, supporters like @GlobalDis pushed the narrative that the charges were a hit job, tied to his anti-establishment rants. The victims, anonymous under UK law, faced scrutiny too. Why wait so long? Skeptics asked. Prosecutors countered that delayed reporting was common in sexual assault cases, especially against powerful figures. The women, supported by specially trained officers, stood firm, their accounts detailed and corroborated by police work. Their stories shared chilling similarities: Brand's charisma, his intensity, his ability to make them feel special before turning controlling, aggressive, or worse. The CPS emphasized the strength of the evidence, with Narwhal noting the careful review that led to charges. Furphy's call for more victims suggested the police believed the 4 women were just the start. Brand's past offered ammunition for both sides. His memoirs, My Bookie Wook and Bookie Wook 2, were littered with tales of sexual conquests, orgies, and a self-confessed sex addiction. Defenders argued this transparency undercut the allegations. Why would a predator document his exploits? Prosecutors saw it differently. The books showed a man who reveled in power, who saw women as trophies, and who admitted to pushing boundaries. His 2007 stand-up special, Russell Brand, Doing Life, included jokes about sexual aggression that now read as chilling foreshadowing. A 2006 BBC radio clip resurfaced, where he bragged about chasing women at work, prompting the BBC's apology. The media dug deeper, with the Times uncovering a 2001 XFM incident where Brand allegedly harassed a female producer live on air. The pattern was hard to ignore. The cultural context was just as fraught. Brand's case landed in a post-MeToo world grappling with accountability and redemption. His pivot to right-wing politics, railing against vaccines, globalism, and woke ideology, made him a hero to some and a villain to others. His supporters saw a conspiracy, a takedown of a man who dared to speak truth to power. His critics saw justice, a reckoning for a man who dodged consequences for too long. On X, the debate raged at Midas_Lauren praised the victim's bravery, citing studies showing false accusations are rare, while at Zero President pushed a theory that the charges were timed to silence Brand's RNC speech. The truth was murkier, but the polarization was stark. Brand's personal life added another layer. His marriage to Katy Perry, a whirlwind from 2010 to 2012, was dissected anew. Perry had stayed silent, but tabloids speculated about what she knew. Brand's current wife, Laura Gallagher, stood by him, with sources claiming she believed his past is past. His conversion to Christianity, complete with a public baptism in 2024, was a cornerstone of his defense narrative. In videos, he spoke of redemption, of being born again, of leaving behind the imbecile he once was. Critics rolled their eyes, seeing it as a calculated rebrand, but his fans lapped it up, casting him as a modern-day martyr. The U.S. lawsuit was a ticking bomb. Jane Doe's allegations, assault on the Arthur set, enabled by a complicit crew, painted a picture of Brand as untouchable, even in Hollywood. The claim that he smelled of alcohol clashed with his sobriety timeline, giving his team an angle to attack her credibility. But the details were damning: a bathroom assault, a crew member allegedly standing guard, a studio accused of turning a blind eye. Warner Brothers' denial did little to quell speculation, and Brand's fear of U.S. charges was palpable. A conviction in London could embolden New York prosecutors, turning a civil case into a criminal one. His team's push to delay the deposition showed their panic. Brand was fighting a war on two fronts, and the odds were stacking against him. As May 30, 2025, approaches, the stakes are apocalyptic. A rape conviction could mean life in prison, a sentence that would end Brand's career and cement his infamy. His defense will likely hinge on dismantling the accuser's credibility, emphasizing the decades-long gap in his documented history of consensual promiscuity. They'll paint the charges as a media-driven vendetta, possibly tied to his political stances. The prosecution will counter with the pattern: for women, similar stories, across years, backed by police work and CPS scrutiny. Furphy's open investigation suggests more charges could emerge, especially if other victims step forward, as many suspect they will. Brand's public persona is on life support. His YouTube channel, though demonetized, still churns out content, blending spiritual musings with defiant jabs at the elites. His fans remain loyal, seeing him as a saint persecuted for his beliefs. But the mainstream has turned. Hollywood is silent, his old allies distant, his once-packed venues empty. The U.S. lawsuit looms, with criminal potential if prosecutors act. The BBC and Channel 4 inquiries have tarnished his legacy, exposing a culture that enabled him for too long. Even his memoirs, once a badge of honesty, are now exhibits A and B for the prosecution. The trial will be a colossus, a clash of narratives: celebrity versus justice, truth versus conspiracy, power versus accountability. Brand, ever the showman, will play his part, but the courtroom is no comedy stage. He can't charm his way out of this, can't riff his way to freedom. London waits, the world watches, and the question burns: will Russell Brand rise from the ashes, or is this the final act of a star who flew too close to the sun?